just let my body crack open. It was almost like I hadn't met myself, because I never made a lot of time for the deep sorrow that was inside of me.
We're back. I love you. How are you doing? I have a treat for you. It comes in the form of a beautiful human named Susan Ateh. She is a breathwork facilitator, and like the people that I trust the most in this world, her transmission is really about sending you back to yourself for healing and wholeness and growth. And her path is so relatable. It's the path of all of us, the reconnection to our emotions. Susan writes, I was suppressing my feelings. I found myself down a rabbit hole of self-loathing, which led to a state of depression. My identity was trapped in the prism of the industry. And just to interject here for a minute, the industry she's referring to is the film industry. As you'll hear in this conversation, she's an actor. But I think industry is really the perfect word. It represents really the lane that each of us has to pick to swim in, to engage in capitalism in a way that we can sustain our lives. It asks so much of us to turn ourselves into a product. And inevitably, as Susan says, I had given away my power. I was lost and depleted, and I needed help. Breathwork was a catalyst. I remembered who I was. I reclaimed the missing pieces of myself. So especially in these times when the intersection of so-called spirituality or wellness and capitalism is so strong, and we're being marketed to so many new Insta pills to nirvana. You can buy sage to smudge your house on Amazon and Walmart. It can feel so grounding to me to remember that breath is a democratic and infinitely available tool to reconnect to myself. And I really like that breath work is a somatic practice. So even more than meditation, I think it really forces me into the work that I'm most resisting, the stuff that I think is too hard or that I just don't have time for. When I actually show up to it the way Susan describes, I actually realize that engaging with it is actually the only thing that will make me feel better. And that's why people like Susan are such powerful company along the path of saying, like, yo, I know it's scary to slow down and deal with stuff, but I'm here. I'm proof that it's possible. I'm with you. And we can do this together right now. We don't need an expert. Just breathe with me. That is some revolutionary shit. So I want to touch on something that comes up in this conversation briefly and just flesh it out a little further for 1 second. And that's about sage and Palo Santo, particularly white sage, which is a plant that I'm sure most of you know is used for smudging. It has been. It's an indigenous practice to smudge with sage as a way to clear energy. And it's being over-harvested, along with many other medicines, including ayahuasca and peyote. These plants are sacred ceremonial tools that are being colonized and industrialized and marketed to mainstream white Americans as sort of this Insta spirituality. There's a Dakota Lakota Sioux writer named Ruth Hopkins, and she says, when using medicinal plants, it's important that the plant is used sustainably. When we pick sage, we always leave the root and say a prayer of thanks for the harvest. This is as much a part of the smudging or saging as burning the plant is. So it's important to leave the root because that's how the plant grows back. And if someone is harvesting white sage and they don't know that, they are completely destroying future generations of that plant. And that's been happening, especially in California. It's just the white sage population is being decimated. And predictably, these plants are no longer accessible to the very indigenous communities that have nurtured them and worked with them so deeply for thousands and thousands of years. And many of these communities who are the most vulnerable, the most cut off from whatever meager social services this country does offer, these plants are integral to the spiritual and physical health practices that serve most people in these communities. And as we talk about in this conversation, big picture, American colonizers stripped the indigenous people of their land and their spiritual practices and, of course, their lives to build what we think of now as the United States. And now the current inheritors of that United States are devouring those same practices without any concept, no honor for the sacrifices and the struggles that the indigenous protectors of those practices have gone through to make that medicine even available to us today. So, as one of those white people, I just want to acknowledge that I'm learning about this currently, deepening my understanding and how I can take responsibility. We are all welcome to burn plants as a way to commune with their spirits and commune with the greater creation that we're all a part of. And there are a lot of different plants that we can learn about to do that. Cinnamon stick, lavender, pine, cloves. There's a shit ton of rosemary growing in Birmingham. It's like the parking lot island plant here. There's a huge bush in my front yard. Just we can be aware of where the plants that we're working with came from. Like literally the plant in our hand. Where did it grow? Who grew it? And if there's any doubt, we can grow the plants ourselves, which is really the best way to develop a relationship with it that's actually sacred and healing, which is supposedly the goal of all of these practices. So I have a lot of respect to the integrity that Susan brings to her work. I so appreciate the way that she makes healing accessible. I'm really glad that you're here with us. Here is Susan Ateh. You're such a pro. I feel like your transmissions over the internet you hit that magical sweet spot of both seeming like a real human and also being super informative.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate hearing that. Yeah, I think that, when you just decide to sink into your truth, I guess that's how, for better or for worse, you just try and open your heart out and just, share.
Yeah. Have you always been a pretty transparent person, or was that a decision at some point?
I think it was a bit of both. I was a very protective person. And I was recently actually reflecting on that because I was like, I think that when you're a very sensitive child and a lot happens around you and you're seeing certain things unfolding, but you're also been talked to as a child and being protected by adults around you. And so the truth isn't been told,
Mm-hmm.
I think something happens whereby you kind of move up to your headspace to protect yourself from your heart because a distrust begins to happen because deep down it's like, no, I know what I'm seeing is very different to what I'm being told.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think coming into that journey of then going into truth is really letting go of my headspace and coming into my heart space. So where it was originally, right? It's like just coming back to yourself, which is a lot of unpeeling and pain and layers of like protection, right? That you have to suddenly choose to let go of.
It really is.
Yeah.
Well, maybe a nice place to start would be, would you share a little bit about your offerings and sort of how you work with people to really connect them to that place inside themselves?
Sure. I think when I start, the biggest thing for me, just as somebody who holds space, is trust and safety. And I think that comes again from my personal space, from where I come from originally. And I think that is something that is just so dear and important to my heart. And I know how hard it is to be vulnerable and to work on certain things within yourself, that I just think it's crucial to have a setting whereby you can have an opportunity to hold that with someone else witnessing it, which is so delicate. And it means so much to me, you know. So whenever someone reaches out to me and just says, you know, I felt so safe in your group or in our private, like that's it, right? Because I know that once you have safety, you then have an opening to look at things that either may be very scary, because I think we also underestimate what we hold in our bodies and what we've pushed down, or what has been classified as shameful or bad. You know, we just have all these words. And so it's really hard to look at that, because also it's attached to an emotional component that can feel very overwhelming in the body. It's also attached to trauma, depending on what people have been through in their lives. So to me, it's just so sacred to have a space. It's crucial to have a space where people can really feel that they can start to open and reflect and go at their own pace. Because this is where ego comes in and out, right? And I think I got lucky that I checked mine quite early, you know, because as a practitioner, you can feel, oh, I need to make sure this person, and I was just like, no, everything in that moment is this person's journey, and I'm simply there to hold them through it. And so I have people who go very deep, and I have people who kind of touch something, and at that moment they can't get deeper, and that's okay, right? It's really, how do you start to connect with the movement of your own body? How do you start to communicate to your body by dropping in? And then they are also trying to figure out the trust with themselves, right? That's the connector. And I know for me, when I really dropped into my body the first time, it was so overwhelming. I didn't realize how much was contained in there. And I was like, oh my God, everything is there. Like everything is within me. And what I love the most is starting to witness, you know, especially if I have people for periods of time, is starting to witness them evolve, witness them grow, witness them love themselves. Like, even though we're still in humanity, right? It's complex, it's hard, it's difficult, it's all of those things. But when I witness people just say, I really love myself, like I'm making myself a priority now, or I've noticed how much I used to abandon myself, you know, to please others, to fit in. And suddenly I'm just like, no, what do I really want versus how am I supposed to be perceived? And I think once we start to unpack that, we start to have this dialogue with the truest part of ourselves. And then pathways just start to open up that you couldn't even dream of, right, for yourself. It's suddenly not about what I'm supposed to be doing, what my mom wanted me to do, or, you know, what this degree was supposed to, have this income for me. It's suddenly like, oh my God, what am I most pulled toward? What is my compass, my inner compass? Like, where is it drawing me? And that freedom to just be like, oh, I'm suddenly here. And your mind can't do it because your mind is so patterned. So we have to connect to something deeper. And that's what I want to get people to, you know.
And is breath work the main tool that you're using to explore that?
With clients, certainly, yes. And journaling, you know. But what I love about the breath, this particular breath work, and what it allowed for me was to really start to release from my mind, release from all the chitter chatter, all the stories, and just allow myself to drop in. And the breath to me is almost like it's a communication with spirit, right? Each breath. I mean, we're born and we take our first breath, and that's life, you know? And so being able to use that same tool to actually start to journey within. I mean, I always say it's kind of like the biggest adventure of my life. I traveled a lot, but traveling within has been the most magnificent journey. I mean, hard and just what's there, like, oh my god, you know, like I've been in the trenches, and then like I almost, like, you know, talk about it in the same way like I would talk about like going on a journey in the world, but like in terms of topography, it's like I'll hit these like rugged landscapes or like these harsh desert, like where I'm just like, oh my god, this is barren here, like what, there's, you know, and then I'll journey into these luscious waterfalls, and then I'll be in like in the forest, and like tropical forest, and it's dense and sweaty, and like, you know, it's like all the things that I just encounter within myself, and different places where I get to meet different parts of myself, also where I get surprised, like I have found pockets of myself where it's like where I used to be in love, you know, and he's still there. Like he's within me, he's in my hip, and I'm suddenly like, wow, he's still there. And then I get an opportunity to work on that and allow that grief to come through. Right. And the same with like different parts of like my age, like when I was 3, or, you know, I often love to go to my 3-year-old self and just like have a dialogue with her. Like it's such an amazing opportunity, because to me, I'm like, yes, we grow, but all those ages are within us still, right? And so I think breathwork is such an amazing opportunity to meet all the different parts of you. And in that moment, as long as there's love and as long as there's compassion, you can express your righteous anger that you had at that time that you may have had to swallow, right? So that finally gets to move through you. You know, you can express a pain or grief that you had that you weren't able to voice at a certain age, and you get to move that through you. So we can go with the breath work, like, you know, down the ages, or we can look at it right now in the present. And also, I think the beautiful thing is when you start to really do the work, is you let it reveal itself to you, right? So you can set an intention, but actually, if you're really serving and communing with the breath, it reveals what's ready to come through for you. And then you can meet it, right? And I always say, meet the resistance, meet the anxiety, meet the depression. They're our biggest teachers. And we're often taught that, you know, they're scary parts of ourselves, but they're just parts that aren't getting the time to communicate. And so they're translating into something to say, hey, I'm here, right? So, yeah.
Man, your language is just so delicious. I love the way that you present, you know, the landscape within. That feels so resonant to me. And it sounds like what you're speaking to is sort of, at least this is something that I feel like I'm coming more in tune with in my own body, is that when I, for sort of expediency or survival reasons, when I'm in stressful situations or situations where I'm feeling angry, but it feels like I'm not able to sort of, I have to protect myself and keep it inside, and it's like it gets stashed away in my body someplace. You're sort of speaking to the idea of like creating an intentional space when it is safe to experience it. I wonder if you could kind of explore the idea of safe a little bit in the context of emotional work, because I sometimes catch myself talking about trauma so much in the past. Like I've had these experiences, these practices that let me revisit stuff that happened, but I'm also very aware that in the world we live in, like there are people who deal with ongoing trauma on a daily basis. So yeah, I that was a lot to throw at you, but I'm just curious sort of what safety looks like in terms of being able to really feel that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I'll touch it in, like, say, with anger. It's just something that I'm still exploring, all of this all constantly, and especially, when I get the chance to explore it with clients, and always learning and always developing, and just knowing that we've been told, for instance, that anger is bad.
Mm.
We've been told that we need to present ourselves in a certain way, and especially for Black women and brown women, right? Anger is labeled for us as the angry Black woman, right? So there's this other side, I mean, that's also like layered with, I have to put on this mask because if I'm seen as this, then I'll get labeled as that, right? Mm-hmm. And I just think that every single emotion we have them for a reason. We have them because they give us the ability to move something through us, to express something through us. And so I love creating spaces where you get to move that anger so that you're not hurting someone else, but you're also not hurting yourself. And we're actually saying it's a beautiful thing, right? It's a beautiful thing that I get to express my rage. It's a beautiful thing that I get to express every single emotion that moves through, and to actually set the intention or the space for them. Because in everyday life, right, we're always having to present ourselves in the way that society, we're all just so programmed. And it's incredible how programmed we are in a way that even when we're trying to deprogram, I mean, it's just like, it's just kind of like sometimes I'm like, what, like, what is actually like, I have to like really just go back in, go back in, go back in, go back in, go back in. And I know that for a lot of us, I know for me, I didn't feel safe to express a lot of so many areas of myself. I had a lot of anger growing up, for sure, that I just didn't know where to place it. And so when if I have a moment where I encounter myself like being angry, like I can feel or encounter myself where I'm in a moment where like something happens and I get triggered, right? Whatever that is. And suddenly, like I literally go, I hold my breath and everything tightens and I swallow it and I push it down. And so I feel like for me, that means I'm storing it. So then it's kept within my cells. Whereas if it's something that's super joyful or we see something that makes us laugh, like for instance, laughter, we're moving energy when we're laughing, right? It's just like it flows. And so I feel like I want us to do the same with every emotion that comes through. And so even though we're still building up to that and we can't, well, maybe it's a moment where then I create an intentional space and I revisit that and I let it move through. And so I give myself the time to express that feeling. And for some people, it can look like just writing, right? Journaling. For some people, it can look like screaming into a pillow. Whatever it is for you. But I just think it's so important to, even though we can catch ourselves doing it, right? Because it's, and that's okay. Like, I think it's okay to be like, okay, I did that. I got triggered and I did the thing that I usually do. And then it's like, okay, what was that thing? And just taking the time for that moment. To me, that's what it is. It's like a very intentional, where you're still in communication with yourself and still giving yourself that relationship.
Rather than shaming yourself or...
Rather than shaming yourself, rather than beating yourself up. There's a myriad of ways, right, that we all behave. And usually that's something that came from childhood. in the way we react to certain things that we're told. You don't get to express that. You don't cry, right? How many children are we told, don't cry, stop crying?
Was the feeling that you couldn't be angry, is that something that you were taught explicitly or that you absorbed by being in the world?
I think I definitely absorbed it by being in the world. But I think like with many of, you know, I'll speak on it for me because I don't know, but I think in that kind of generation, you know, my mom was very young when she had me. We didn't really have that kind of language that we have now, right? My mom comes from her generation and her mom had like 6 children. They didn't have time to be going, hi, love, how are you?
Right.
You know, it's like it was just a different. So she has learned stuff, right? That it's not like I mean, she's an incredible woman and she took great care of me, but it just wasn't something where we sat down and talked about our feelings and what was really going on within me. And also learned behavior, as in, I certainly felt like I was taught, like, you know, to be a good person, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was more about like being respectful to the teachers, making sure I was polite, you know? Right, like all those things. And so you just go, okay, how does that look? And you see it and then you just copy it and then you start to kind of just lose yourself because you're trying to just present yourself to the world in a way that is like, quote unquote, the good girl. And I was the good girl for so many years. And that was also part of, like, for instance, my battle, like going into casting rooms. My God, I was the good girl. So I had no personality. I did a very good audition. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And there was no, I was scared to show who I was because I didn't even know who the hell I was. Like, how was I gonna show that? And like all the parts that now are so interesting about me are the parts that I was trying so hard to hide.
Man, that's so resonant for me. I was a child actor, and I had such a painful, hard, rude awakening to being in the world as an adult actor around like 18,
Right.
19, 20, because I'd been such a high achiever, and I just,
Yeah.
similarly, like you're saying, like I was good at stuff, and
Yeah.
when I was a kid, I wasn't cognizant totally of like what I was presenting to the world. It was just coming out of me. And I think as an adult, exactly like you're saying, like I just didn't know how to trust that same fountain inside of me. It was like it was a job, and I was terrible at it, and I didn't enjoy it. It was so stressful.
Yeah. Yeah. And you kind of have your marching orders, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is how you do it. And then you did, and you know, and it's excruciating.
And acting, of course, is such a weird, particular art form where it's like you really are stepping into rooms where you're being judged on who you are.
And that has been such a journey. And actually, now I look at it and go, oh, I remember a specific day where I was going into this audition in LA. And I was just like, God, why do you know, universe, like, I was like, why? Like, why are you still giving me auditions? Like, why is this still coming my way? Like, if you're not, you know what I mean? If I'm not like getting the jobs right now, like, what is the point? And I just remember this loud voice just went, because when you own yourself in that space, a deep healing will happen. Because that was the space in for years that I would be terrified to go in, try to hide myself, abandon myself, because it's like, what do you need from me? Is this what you want? Like, what is it? Like, what can I give you? Is this it? Is that, you know, where I wouldn't bring my soul into the room. And then I would leave, and it would be like, I mean, under the duvet for days. It was just like all the things. And just the self-loathing, the low self-worth. I'm the worst. Like, just on and on and on. The self-talk was just so, like, I just feel for that girl so much, if only I'd done this, maybe I didn't wear the right outfit, if I'd lost weight, if, right?
It never ends.
It never ends. So doing this work of unpacking is amazing, because I mean, I still audition, I still work, but it's so, like, it's not a priority for me, which is actually so liberating. Whereby now when I walk in, it's about, how do I own my space in a room like that? Because, like, for me, the art is one thing, and then the industry is another, right? And I think the industry, unfortunately, is very detrimental to mental health for actors. And so that's something that I am very passionate about. And so, like, I even work with actors with breath work and stuff like that. And I even did one around mental health for a breathwork exercise, because it really can drain all the incredible parts of you, because you're trying to fit into something that is a complete illusion, right?
Are you talking about sort of the ideal,
Yes,
human?
the ideal, which is the ideal human, right? When you look, for instance, I mean, that's why I also love working back home. It's just America has a very, like, I look and I go, how is that a lawyer on TV? She's got a Gucci outfit, and she just looks like what, quote unquote, is supposed to be the stunning girl. I'm like, where's the interesting lawyer? And I think it's coming more, right, slowly, but that is what you had to live up to. I mean, you look at it, you get a breakdown, stunning, beautiful. It's like, okay, but she's a lawyer. Why does she have to be stunning? And you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, how are these? So instead of actually, like, preparing and, like, digging into, you're trying to, like, run, whatever miles, or do your cardio work, or, like, wear this outfit that's gonna look flattering, rather than actually do your work. And I was saying to my manager, because I was like, now that I'm in my truth moments, I literally had a whole conversation with her, and I said, I hate slating. I said, because when they ask me to slate, I feel like you're objectifying me. And so I no longer feel it's about the work. And so everything goes out. The whole joy of the art of it, or finding a character, like the interesting parts of it, die for me. Because I'm too busy sucking my stomach in, rather than really, like, making myself a live, human, incredible being that can sit in front of you and just be.
I feel like a big unspoken part of this too is just how, like, male gazy the whole thing is. It's just so
right?
Sexualized.
So sexualized, and we're usually the character is usually there to feed into some storyline, right? That's going to have some kind of romantic interest, right? Especially in my 20s. Like, I was reflecting on that as well, which I didn't see, because I just wanted to work. But I was a lap dancer, I was a prostitute. And does that go with being, like, mixed race, and like I'm fetishized, and this the word exotic. And so, yeah, let's give her the job as a lap dancer. But whoa, and I just didn't have the knowledge that I have now. I didn't have the insight that I have now, I mean, even in Ireland, and they had to make her British. It's like, why can't I be Irish? And even on another show, I was having an affair, And I was like, oh, I was totally sexualized the whole time. But we're told to like that.
Right. That's success.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. If you get the one that says beauty, like that's a good thing. And the most liberating moment I had was when I got this one job. It was a series in Ireland, and it just freed me up so much because it was in a small town, and she was a policewoman, and she had like 2 children, and she was pregnant, and she just didn't give a shit. And I fucking loved it. I loved it. I relished in it, and I knew when that part, like even I knew I was gonna get. You know when you just feel a pull, I was like, "That's mine," and it just like because it helped to break that down for me to look at myself and go, "It's okay that you're not full of makeup," because you get right. You buy into the story,
Right. It gets internalized. Yeah.
of course. And then there was a moment where I was like, oh my God, people are going to look at me and I won't be the beautiful girl part anymore. But it was actually exactly what I wanted and needed because I got to do work, like real work. And it's kind of the same in real life, right? It's like, who are you really? So that you can really be your true self. What is it that you need to let go of? What is it that you need to release?
Yeah, I remember when I stopped pursuing acting as my primary thing in my early 20s, having this revelation that I was like, I feel beautiful for the first time in my life because I'm no
Right,
longer trying to earn it or
right.
basing my self
Yes.
worth on other people's thoughts about that. And in the times that I've acted since then in, friends things in roles where I was just invited and yeah, again, didn't have to earn it. I was like, oh, I forgot what it feels like to play. And I feel like that
Right.
has correlated to my real life in so many ways of just letting go of the culture of having to like deserve and earn and outcompete, and it's so insidious, and I think it comes
Yeah.
through many industries.
Many, yeah, and comparison, my God, because we're taught that to compare ourselves to others and compare successes and compare jobs. And it's like, but actually, when I choose to swim in my own lane, when I just choose to stay there and just like allow my own path to just open itself up for me and to be able to even look and see someone else's path and be in so much joy for their journey and just go, I'm good. Like, I'm good. And it took me a long time to get there, but and what I also know, because again, I don't know how you felt about this, but I remember when I first discovered like awareness or self-help books and everything, and these promises in 30 days, do you know what I mean? Like your life is going to be this, you're going to manifest. I bought into that like every 30 days I'd be like, well, what? Or like something, I'd get a little something and I'd be like, oh, but then it was gone, poof. And I was like, oh no. Or I'd feel sad and be like, oh my God, it's not working. I'm sad. It's just and
Riding that roller coaster.
like they literally feed you shit. I'm sorry, but it's true. Like it's just like, and then when I released that, I was like, oh, but I can live in sadness, and that is as beautiful. I can go through a really hardcore journey, but I'm in a place where I know I can love myself enough through that. I know that that is part of the journey of being a human being. There is no, I've arrived. I think it's a constant journey. And anyone who tells me I know myself inside out, like the back of my hand, I just go, okay. Wow. But then has life stopped for you, right? There's this constant evolvement, there's constant discovery. And I want to keep learning, I want to keep deepening. And I know that comes with dark nights of the soul, as they say, and it really does. And things come in layers too, right? There may be, like, you know, a lot of people say, but I've been through this already. I thought I dealt with this already. Like, why am I back here again? Like, well, it's just the next layer. And the next layer can be a year later. And then you come out, it comes back to you, and there's something else there to discover. Like timing of things that come to you.
What has this year been unwrapping for you?
Oh my gosh, so much, Rose. It's just like so much, but in a way, incredible. I mean, I think this year I've really owned my space to say, yeah, I can hold space, and who I want to be as I'm holding space. And of course, constantly learning, like every person I work with teaches me as much as I hope to be able to hold space for them where they can feel safe to move through their stuff, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm always learning. The minute we got into lockdown, I just remember feeling a sense of something just lifted from my shoulders. It was like this huge weight. And I'm always someone who, you know, and I'm sure you feel this too because you're an artist, and it's hard to not live in society because it's just the way it's designed, right? You have to be part of the money thing. You have to be part of the, right? You're just in a chain. So it's like hard to be like, how can I really, truly disconnect if you're not into it? But to capitalism. And even though for people who look at me and think that I live, you know, on the periphery of all that, but we still have to be linked to it, right? And so I didn't realize how much I was still stressed and so tired and unable to find my way because the rhythm of that life wasn't for me. So when it all stopped, that weight lifted because I think I just was like, oh, thank God. And then I started finding my own rhythm. I started finding my voice, like who is it that I want to be? How do I want to work with people? What do I want to be able to offer and open it up so that as many people as I can in every level of society can have access. And I went in immediately into service when this happened. I wanted to be there. It was just very instinctual. I'm very new in the wellness industry. And so when the killing of murder of Ahmaud Arbery happened, I was so mad. I got really angry, and I was angry that certain people that I looked up to in the breathwork industry were just so silent. I remember I was doing this exercise class, and I was just moving through me, and I just like literally took my phone and I just recorded my feelings. And I just sent it out there. I was just like, I couldn't. And then, of course, George Floyd happened, and then we had the whole, right, uprising. And that was another incredible, painful, eye-opening, where I got to observe and see within me my own internalized racism. And my background's different. Like, I'm not American. Like, and then I had to also recognize my own privilege. And I just really wanted to be present and wanted to be a part of this journey where I felt there was a specific moment where our voices had risen and we had to take that opportunity.
As someone who's not born here, I'm curious what your perspective is. How do you navigate that of, you know, your life being rooted here in many ways, I'm sure. What is that like?
I remember when I first landed in LA, I did notice everybody was segregated. I remember finding that strange. But I also I was born in England, but I spent from the age of 3 to 14 in Cameroon, West Africa. My dad is from Cameroon. And every summer we would go to Ireland. In my granny's town. We were the only mixed race children. You know, and I remember hearing like a couple of like people, you know, making fun of me or whatever, but it was so not the norm. So it wasn't something that it was every day or like an awareness. My parents never really talked about race. They're a mixed race couple, but it was just nothing. It wasn't, and it's not like they were avoiding it. I think they just really led their lives and they loved each other, and that was that. And also living in Cameroon, the interesting thing is like I was very much considered mixed in Cameroon. I wasn't like considered black at all. It's very different to America where you're either black or white. You know what I mean? There's this kind of like straight down the line thing that's there. And I understand where the history of that comes from, and it makes a lot of sense, right? And I was exposed to both of my culture, right? I was very much exposed to both throughout my whole life. So landing here, I don't think I saw it for a long time, because even when I came here, I was like, most of my life, especially I moved to Ireland when I was 14, so I was always around white people. Half of my whole family is white, you know. Like I was in a convent in Ireland.
Whoa.
And I know. I'm like, and sometimes I knew I was different. There weren't a lot of, you know, I think like I was probably the only person in my school. So everyone was more curious. I feel like Ireland is a different picture right now, and I know that they definitely, when the whole uprising of George Floyd happened, there was a lot of protests also on the street in Ireland, standing in solidarity with America, but also, you know, for what's going on there, because I think a lot of people, like a lot of Nigerians have immigrated there. Ireland was a very poor country. So then when it started getting wealth, of course, more people started migrating there. So there's a lot of Nigerians. There's just a lot of different people from different countries that have now moved to Ireland. So there's a shift there. And I think that a lot of people have experienced racism there too. And so it's having their voice heard. But that wasn't my experience when I was there at my age, right? There's something just so painful about witnessing racism in America, because there's something about the dehumanization of another human that's just, I find it so hard to wrap my head around the level of hatred, the lack of care that I see. Like, I mean, I remember at the time getting so angry and just being like, how is this okay? And then you have a moment, an opportunity to see it, because now it's like in your face. And still so many people don't want to talk about it, or really, more than that, investigate within themselves, right? Everybody's trying to be the exception or something. It's like, no, we all have it. And I always start the conversation with, I have it. Because it's so indoctrinated that white is better. It's something the same way you take your first breath, that's in that breath.
Man, that's so sad. It's that's the truth that we really don't want to deal with, because it's horrific. Yeah.
And I think people are so terrified to sit with that within themselves. Because so what would it mean then for certain people in terms of their identity?
Can you unpack that a little bit?
So yeah, I may not have gotten this or that, or life didn't work out for me, but I'm white. It almost feels like it's something that they can hold on to, so that they don't feel at a complete loss, you know?
Yeah, it's like this inherent exceptionalism.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the but I'm. And I also compare it to almost like, a 12-step program. I think we all have to, really be truthful and just say, admit, yes, I am. Then we begin the work. I think the other part is it's just too much. It's like, I just find it exhausting. If that makes sense. Like, I just find it exhausting to listen to someone trying to explain to me why they can't be.
Why they can't be racist.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you have energy to hold space for people who really want to be in process with it? Is that something that you feel like you want to be a person for?
Yes, and I did a lot of it because that was also very interesting, having a lot of people depend on me and come to me for advice, whether it be, okay, we need to send, because everybody was sending out letters, right, from their business. And so, yeah, you remember that part. So I had a lot of people. Yeah, I had a number of people reach out to me in terms of wording. And I remember my very first thing was like, apologize. Whether it was intentional or not, apologize. Because that's a very important step. A lot of people that started with, we have integrity, we will not condone. Of course you're condoning it. Like, you just have to look at your business. Whether it's conscious or unconscious, it doesn't matter. So the first step is, I'm sorry. And I remember I take the class by Tamron Toomey, and she started her class and she apologized. And she was like, here, I thought I had it. Like, I thought I was this person who was in integrity, who led with her heart. And she was like, I miss this. And it's not okay. And then you go about doing the steps, right? Then you go about unlearning. Then you go about unpacking. Then you do the work. And that's why I still take her class today. Because I'm not saying you know what to do. But I'm saying it's okay to say sorry that I have been taking advantage, right? Whether I chose to be conscious or not conscious of it, or, whatever which way. But if we all break down things, right, we've all turned our eye, right?
When the system was in our favor. Yeah.
Yeah. But but of course I would. But, but I'm like, would you? Because if you're going to a meeting in a conference room, are you looking around and saying, are you the one that will put your hand up and go, why aren't there more women? Why aren't there more Black women? Why aren't there more brown women? Why aren't there, you know what I mean? Why aren't there more trans women? Why aren't there, And that is where I feel like also doing the work of kind of coming back to you is where you get courageous acts, right? Because then you find your core. It just becomes the act to do. But I feel like this year is really asking for people's introspection. People have been locked down this year. Yes, there's a virus that is taking hold and is really destroying a lot of people's lives and a lot of communities, right? That virus is also getting people to stop. And what happens when you stop? You get opportunity to go within. But again, that's up to the person, where you have to make the choice. And I feel like a lot of people have been awakened in terms of within themselves to sit with the uncomfortableness of being in their body and their skin and all of that. So there's an opportunity there. I mean, honestly, I don't know. We can all debate this, but I don't know if the uprising as it happened would have had the same impact had it not been during the time of a pandemic, where people had stopped and they had to kind of look at this stuff and they got that momentum. I don't think that if you were going through your everyday life, would this movement have really, you know, like gotten people to go, hey, this is not okay.
I think there's almost a momentum with the discomfort too. Like what had happened this year had already pushed so many people personally out of their comfort zones that it was kind of like, we're already in the shit. Like we'll deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And for people to really feel and see, you know, I mean, we already see there's a shift where people aren't engaging as much, which, you know, I always feared and I knew would come, and, you know, and I'm afraid of cycles. You know, I'm afraid of this is just another cycle.
What was it like for you? You said you're somewhat new to the wellness industry, which is such a paradoxical term in some ways to begin with. But what has it been like for you to kind of grapple with, you know, some of these teachers really not being on top of their own self-work? Has that been liberating in a way, or has it been disillusioning?
I got very lucky that I met incredible women who I feel have a lot of integrity, who really work for me on a different level, which I feel should be the level everybody should be working at. But, you know, how I like to work with it is basically be real, right? I'm not interested in trying to convince you that I have all the answers and I'm going to change your life, because that isn't true. What I feel, unfortunately, there's a lot of ego wrapped up in that world that I think isn't of service. I think that sometimes people are putting a front and not really revealing who they are. And in terms of like lineage and stuff, like, some, you know, not really telling the truth of the origin of, for example, the breath that I learned. And I'm like, what is that about? Or using the breath work, which is, its origin is in India, but then you're using sage and Palo Santo and you're burning, you know what I mean? Like, I'm okay. Like, I feel like we need to be in integrity. And as an Irish Cameroonian, I have such rich heritage that I don't feel I need to go and take someone else's medicine and not honor that medicine, or not pay it forward, or not. I just had a really hard time with that. I had a really hard time with like not explaining where this breath came from. It didn't sit well with me, but we worked through it with these women, and I, again, going back to safe spaces, you know, spaces where Black and brown people could feel safe, you know. So interesting as I'm talking about it, because almost I feel like that chapter was just so traumatic that I can't even articulate it, because it was just so intense.
Well, I really respect all of your courage and integrity in speaking up about that. You know, about somebody that like has a lot of power and visibility in the industry, and to really ask for transparency and like direct communication. I really appreciate that, because it's clearly not going to happen unless it's demanded. I wonder if you have any perspective for people who are, I guess, seeking connection to practices that really can, I guess the honest and like a little bit messier question is like, white people, especially in America, like our tradition is colonizing and raping and killing people. Like we don't have, speaking as like an American white woman, I don't have a super vibrant, alive, on access lineage of healing to tap into. And that sucks. And I feel like moving forward, like we all have to find better ways if we're all going to make it through this thing together. So I wonder, like, if you could provide some insight from your work, as a breathwork practitioner, and maybe as somebody with some outside perspective on this country culturally. Like, what is the pathway forward to engaging in practices that are, available and exist without just bringing that same, like, colonizing mishmash mentality to it? Like, how to honor it and engage with it, and, like, is that even something that should be available to me as a white person?
Right. And I mean, yeah, it's interesting with that, right? Because I think it's also about really like finding, like doing a lot of research. Maybe it's also about really finding your lineage, tapping into that. I mean, I was listening to a workshop, a woman who works with bees, and she talked a lot about medicine from Eastern Europe because that's where her lineage is from. And there is richness, right? Because most white people in America come from Europe. So taking that time, and I'm like Ireland, for instance, I mean, gosh, is it rich, and like Irish people work with herbs, and you can burn different things. It doesn't have to be from native land or where you're taking sage just because sage is the hip thing to cleanse.
Right.
I thought it was because that's what I was taught when I went and trained. I was burning damn sage and Palo Santo, and I fell into the whole thing. I didn't know any different, but I wasn't taught any different. I wasn't taught about the history. I wasn't taught that in 78, just before 78, that indigenous people native to this land, if caught doing their own medicine, would face consequences. And then here we are just burning it because it's cool and buying it at Urban Outfitters. Like, it's just not okay. And so I haven't used it. Now, if someone buys it for me, I much prefer, like, now I think most people know not to get it for me anymore.
You're talking about white sage.
Yeah. I mean, even Palo Santo, that tree is like, literally, there's just not enough. We just take advantage of one thing and I need. There's something, it's the greed around it. Do you really think that medicine is going to work for you if you're not honoring it? Like, you know what I mean?
If the way that you acquire it creates suffering.
Right.
Yeah.
But also, like, if you don't actually really, if you're not using it the way you should, is it really working for you? And I also really believe in tapping into your ancestral lineage, right? I think it's something that can just be tapped in because it's within us, right? So sometimes maybe we don't have, say, if you're adopted or, but I think that you can really tap in and just even call that energy in. For me, I don't necessarily know that I need to have tools like physical at my disposal for truth like that to work, right? I truly believe that you can create something very sacred for yourself. Whether it's like putting pictures of your grandparents or just calling in your own line, learning from that. And so even before I start my breath work, I usually ground, and then I'll say, this is in this moment, if it feels good for you, you can invite in either your higher power, your spirit guides, your masters, teachers, loved one, your ancestors, God, whatever spirit, what is calling. And if that feels good, create that space for that support. Mother Nature. To me, what that says is I'm not alone. There is a mystery to life. And I understand, my inner knowing knows that we are all linked. We are all coming from source. And each one of us, just the way, like, I'll go on a walk and I'll look at plants and flowers, and they're just doing their own thing. right? None of them are going, oh, I'm not blue enough. Look at that flower. I wish I was that. Everyone's just shining out, in their own particular odd way, unique and beautiful. I don't know if I answered the question, but
You
yeah.
did. Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious what started you on this path, if you had kind of a decisive turning point where you realized that you needed to prioritize inner work.
Yeah, I think my inner work really started at 26. It was the first time I was even aware of self-help or.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that year just doing just so many, I just have acupunctures, spiritual healing. Even therapy, because I didn't do any of those things. And so in that way, I've always been somebody who was a lot of deep thinking, I used to analyze a lot, right? But I just didn't know what to do with all of it. It was a lot of trying to unpack. And, back in my 20s, it was like Tori Amos and crying my eyes out was like how I could connect, because I just didn't have any of the resources, right? There's just so much pain and angst, just so much pain. I had so much pain inside of me. I had so much sadness, and I was so lost. I was so, so lost. I was running away from the pain, though it was just living in me, it was just like, but it's actually when I really met it that I was able to crack open. And I think that happened, I was, in Los Angeles acting and, all of that. But I had a big birthday come up, and I just knew that I didn't want to be in the same place on the other side of this birthday, right? So that was a big, big thing for me. I knew that I wanted to be of service. Now, acting, is it an act of service? Absolutely, right? The arts, right? Incredible way to express and allow other people to see humanity. But the industry is a very different story. And so they weren't fitting together for me. So then I couldn't really be in that service that I wanted. And I know that I love humans. I love the human condition. I think we're an incredible species when we're engaged and really fully there, right? Fully present, not living in fear. And my friend had met somebody who taught breath work, and she said, oh my God, so you want to do this thing? I think you would really, really love it. And I kind of kept it at the back of my mind. So when it was coming up to the birthday, I was like, I remembered the breath work. And I was like, I think I might just try breath work. But the biggest part of that was, again, a voice came and said, just do the training. Don't actually try the breath work. So it was just this really strong kind of pull so I just went to New Mexico. And when I arrived and I tried the breath work for the first time, I was like, how the hell can I get down this mountain? Because this is not what I want. Nope.
Really?
No, absolutely. Oh yeah. I was like, I made a huge mistake. What the hell is this? It was so, so hard. I had so much resistance. My body had never felt this before. But then I did it again, and I was like, oh Christ, there's no way. And these were little ones. It was 5 minutes of breathing. Then it was 10.
What were you experiencing that was so overwhelming?
My whole body was just vibrating. And there was so much pain inside of me, emotional pain. So every time I was reacting, it wasn't like nothing was happening. It was overwhelming. And then the third time that evening, I just opened up. It was just this revelation. And I just let my body crack open. It was almost like I hadn't met myself, because I never made a lot of time for the deep sorrow that was inside of me. So it was just a very, very powerful time. And I was also somebody who, even though I was an actor, but when I was in a circle, I could barely say my name without, like, I was so nervous. I'd tremble. I couldn't read in public. And I look at myself now and I hold space for a lot of people, you know? It's been just so healing for me on so many levels. Because even when I did, I was like, oh, I'll just, I'll use it on myself and, maybe with my family here and there. But no, I'm not going to be, what? I'm not going to, a group? Are you kidding me? Maybe I'll do like one-on-one. I'll try my best, like. But let me tell you, when something is aligned with you, it opens itself up. It opens itself up. And I'm actually not somebody I'm not savvy at business at all. Most of the work I do is people will reach, or something will open up and I'll say yes. Like I have another job, so that I'm not in a situation where this becomes so dependent on the money. And I think that's part of my fear and something I'm still working on, because I have so much passion for this work that I want to be able to, say, yeah, I'll get 20 spaces, but I want to be able to then open up 5 or for free, or, you know what I mean? Or like if anyone wants to reach out to me and say, hey, there's always room for that for me. Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think that what's the beautiful part of the act of service is like, yes, of course, money exchange is wonderful. And I think that is a good thing and all of that. But I also think that this is such an opportunity to give back. And it's something I have that I can give back with. We all deserve to have access to ourselves. And some of us just need help in getting there. That's all. Someone to say, hey, oh, by the way, this is how I did it. Try. See if this tool works for you.
What else are we doing if we're not sharing that kind of information?
Right? Because I know how I felt, when I was in places where someone shared something with me and it changed my life. Or I know what it feels like to be a young person and feel a little lost, and someone who's lived a little longer and had, gone through their shit is like saying, hey, I understand you,
You're not crazy.
You're not crazy. It's okay to cry. It's okay to fall apart. It's okay to be in the mess of it all. Like intimacy and relationships are something that's always been a bigger lesson for me. And that's come into my life now, and I'm working on that, and I have a lot of fear around it, right? So I can be somebody who knows how very, like I've worked on certain things that I've been able to break down for myself, because it's something I can work on solo. And then now the next part is like, oh, I have in partnership, and the fear is like, whoa, like, and I mean, like even yesterday I have like a mini kind of like anxiety, and he was just incredible, and he just said, it's okay. He's like, I understand, and it's okay to be scared. And let's figure it out together,
I so appreciate hearing that from you as someone that is a teacher and a facilitator and holds space for other people. To hear that your work continues is so reassuring.
Oh, 100%, especially in that realm, it's just like I feel like a newborn.
Yeah.
I just feel so tiny and vulnerable and terrified, and and I'm like, I just want to run. Like, man, I'm like, I just want to run. Like, this is too much, And he's just like, no, you're good. Just.
Oh, I'm so glad you found somebody that can match that and who isn't, scared of it either.
Yeah, and the beautiful thing is he's scared of other things, but he's like, I'm not scared of this.
Mm-hmm.
So there's room for me to be scared because he's not then just going to go, well, I'm out. What are you doing? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's like, I can hold this space for you. And I think that's going to be an opportunity of such deep learning for me, which I'll then be able to add another little arsenal to my toolbox. And that's how we do it, right? Because suddenly I'll be able to hold space in a different way because I'll have knowledge because I'm going through it. I can't teach something that I haven't been through.
Mm-hmm.
I can hold space for something I haven't been through, absolutely, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I can relate to. And there's this element now where I'm going, because this is allowing myself to love me even deeper because there's a mirror of someone saying, I'm here and I love you. And I'm not going to jump.
Mm-hmm.
And that hasn't been my pattern. So this is a new pattern because I was very savvy at getting emotionally unavailable people because I'd convinced myself I was available. They weren't.
Right. Right.
And it was perfect.
Yeah.
I'm ready. And I wasn't. That's why I attracted you, because I wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
And right now I am ready, and he's there, and I'm like, I gotta run. I mean, he even just went, why don't you sit with this for a few days?
Oh my goodness.
And I was like, nothing like a teacher who finds another teacher. I love it.
Had you been intentionally calling that energy in?
Yeah. Just in terms of calling in, it's very interesting because I left LA and I specifically came to New York for that. Didn't know he was here, but I had a hunch. And I met him 10 days later.
Magic.
Yeah. And again, right, it's going to be a process. It's going to be really challenging and really hard. And I think part of it will be painful, but also it's hilarious and funny and loving and silly and
letting it be all of that stuff instead of trying to sculpt it into something kind of neat.
yeah.
And
then also like observing the thoughts that come through, the pattern thoughts of anxiety that come through to try and convince me to protect myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because of the work, I'm in a place where I can be grounded enough, love myself enough, and also notice the difference. And what's been extraordinary is watching and observing how my mind and my heart are completely different. And seeing it so clearly. My body reacts differently. And so I listen to my body because my body is telling me, my body is drawn to it. My body knows it's safe. My body wants it. My mind is telling me something completely different.
Right. Because the conditioning is in the mind.
The conditioning is in the mind. And so having done the work, and I'm so used to being in my body that I'm able to recognize it. Whereas if I was somebody who wasn't engaging in my body, I think it would be much harder to discern that. And I think I would have convinced myself that he's not right for me.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been such an incredible observation. Even when we walk into spaces, whether we're drawn to someone, it's like, listen to your body. You know, because our mind will tell us we need to be polite. I'm going to sit and talk to this person for an hour. I'm dead bored. My body does not want to be around this person.
Mm-hmm.
Or like with friendship, if a friendship is over,
let it go.
Let it go.
Your world is so like juicy and delicious.
That was the other thing I will say about 2020. The fight that's in me and still is in me to fight for us to all deserve rest and healing, to all deserve a life that makes us feel full. That's what you fight for. That's, you know, when you're getting engaged, you're out on the streets, you're protesting, all this stuff. Start living it. Because you can do both. You can be angry, but you can also be joyous. And it is part of my revolution to live in joy. because it doesn't mean you stop your activism. In fact, that is part of the activism.
Right. The machine doesn't have space for your joy.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think it also disrupts systems, because I'm saying I have the right to be alive. I have the right to choose how I want to live my life.
The right to feel your feelings.
Yeah. The right to know my body, the right to know and love who I am. There's so many people who from a very young age start to go, I don't like who I am, or I don't like this about myself. I don't like,
Most people I know, I feel like, have lived there for some period of their lives.
Yeah. But also look at what the images were being right in our faces of this is the image that says I'm successful and I got life right.
Totally. Yeah.
It's crazy. I mean, I can barely look at a magazine these days.
Yeah.
I happened upon, I was at a friend's house and I happened upon, I can't remember what it was. Maybe a Vogue or, I don't know, one of those anyway, Style or something. I just flicked through it and I started remembering the times when I used to do that and how icky and gross I felt, but I didn't even realize I felt icky and gross.
Mm-hmm.
How much disdain I had for myself, who I wanted to be, dreaming that I could be,
Yes.
None of it made me feel rich or like loving. It was all like, no, you need this, 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 and you're like, what?
Just inadequacy across the boards. Yeah.
Right? And on top of that, the magazine was full of white people anyway. So it was another
Yeah.
level.
How important are labels to you internally? Because, even something like race can vary just from country to country, what that means or how people ascribe that to you from the outside. Like in your internal storytelling, does that have a place? Does it matter?
I see how it matters in America because it's something in its deepest foundation. Me personally, I don't know that I've ever operated with it in the front of my mind, really, ever. Like, I'm talking about like young age, right? And I'm sure it was there. I even had conversations with my dad because I was saying to my dad, like, my parents met in London. This was during the Margaret Thatcher era. So my dad got a degree in engineering, but like went and tried to get a job and had an interview and they thought he went for the job of a cleaner, that kind of stuff. And, and I was talking to him recently about that, and then I was wondering like how he felt, being with my mom who was white. But even it was interesting because he was just like, we were just together. And other people would think it was weird. And it was when people thought it was weird that then it became weird to us. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think I'm still also unpacking all of that for me.
Yeah.
Because I remember just being very much like, I'm Susan. And I don't know if that was something I was doing to protect myself. But I really walked with that energy. And maybe I had to find that energy because I was somebody who was mixed. And so maybe I was just like, I'm Susan. And I'm always someone, like people always say, well, how do you feel more Irish? Do you feel more, and I was like, I'm Irish Cameroonian. I'm Irish Cameroonian, especially now as a woman, I feel very lucky that I had parents who stayed together long enough where I could really taste both places of where I came from, because I think that can leave people disorientated in their identity.
And well, I'm so grateful that you're using your energy and all that you've been mining in yourself to be of service to people. I feel like there's just really nothing more urgent right now in the state of the world, and I'm just so grateful that you've stepped into that and that you've been so intentional about using what you've found.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And same to you, I certainly know that your podcast and, this platform is been very educational. You know, I get to open my eyes and ears to new things, right? We're always learning, and I think the real storytellers are our own stories, isn't that really? Like,
I definitely have this sense that other people are living their lives because I'm living this one, and
right.
yeah, what a gift to be able to see as much of other people's as we're able to.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the biggest joy I really get is when we gather in circle. It's just so, it's just, oh, it's just everything to me, you know, when people get the opportunity to share and other people get the opportunity to listen. And then when they listen and suddenly they feel less alone because there's safety there, but that deepness literally liberates you out of something that you have been holding on to and trying and living in shame with because you thought there was something wrong with you, that you're the only person, right? Because we've been taught to hide all of that. And like, how can we make that just the same as like sharing a great story? But it's like, it's okay to also share stories that are more challenging. And I certainly know that's where I've grown the most.
It's like, what's true? What's true? That's what I want to hear, is what's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, talk about like where you don't feel alone. But I remember Amy Schumer talking to Oprah, and they were both like, "Oh my God, I'd rather be in the bathroom, literally run into a bathroom, than talk to someone about superficial stuff."
Yes.
And I am so like that. Like that stuff gives me so much anxiety. But if you're
Yes.
like someone I've never met and we just go in, I'm like, ah, you know, I'm like, yes.
So true.
But like, super, I start to sweat. I'm like, oh my God.
Someone starts talking about their commute, and I'm just like,
I'm like,
where's the door?
okay.
Yeah.
You know, like I just get so uncomfortable. And I used to think there was something wrong with me. But I'm like, no, it's just that's who I am. That's what makes me feel alive, is
Yes.
to know your insides. And it's not like I'm saying, tell yourself to me and like, you know, reveal yourself to me in, you know, in 2 seconds. It's not. It's more about like connect. Connect.
Yeah, I used to have so many transactional relationships, like when I lived in New York, cab drivers and
Yes.
cashiers, and I wanted it all surface and all
Yeah.
quick. And
Yeah.
once I started my own journey of getting to know myself, it just suddenly was like every transaction is just a little Trojan horse. It's just a little excuse
Yeah.
to actually get in there with somebody for just a second and just be like, "Hey,
Right?
I see you. I see you."
Yes. Yes. And I feel like actually New York is one of the most incredible places for that to happen. I mean, like, you know, because Los Angeles, it's just difficult to have those moments. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's just harder. But like in New York, because I guess we're on the streets and stuff. And I mean, now, of course, with COVID, it's very different. But you know, like that's what I used to love about the city. There's a different energy where someone's just like in your business.
Yes.
You know, even if it's for 5 minutes, but they're just like, you know, or like the other day I was cycling and someone just went, "Hey, sweetie, you be safe, okay?
Oh.
You make sure you're safe." And I'm just like, oh, okay, I will, you know?
Yeah, I want to live in that world. Yeah.
I want to live in that world. I want to live in that world. Or like, you know, I was moving and this guy was just like walking on. She's like, "Do you need help with your bags?" I mean, there's something that has that here. Even though it's quick and fast, but I think there's something where there's a lot of glimpses. Like London is very hard to get that.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, very, very, very hard. Because mind your own business.
Let's not get messy here with each other's emotions.
Yes, 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 yes. Okay, you're okay. Okay, okay, okay. Bye. You know.
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm sure you're looking forward to getting in the room with people again one day.
Yes, 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 yes. And also just so blessed that actually this work translates really well virtually.
Yeah. Where can people find you if they would like to connect virtually?
Yeah, so my website is susanateh.com. And then Instagram, where I do interact quite a bit there with people. And that's at Irish Infused. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, this has been such a treat. I'm really grateful that you took some time today and that your signal is out in the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was so lovely chatting to you.
While you're on the internet making an appointment with Susan for some virtual breath work, I also wanted to point you toward the open letter that she posted earlier this summer, the one she was talking about that she created with a collective of other femmes in the wellness space. It's a super well-written, really compassionate document. And in addition to the course of action that they outline, they offer this incredible list of Black educators who have written work and paid trainings about this very thing. So it's useful to all of us if you want to check that out. You can find that online at Breathwork for the People. And speaking of spiritual teachers who are tripping on their own transcendence while making a fuck ton of money, I don't know if y'all have discovered Brian Jordan Alvarez on the interweb. He's a really prolific creator, one of those director, writer, producer, actor freaks of nature. A lot of his stuff he puts on YouTube for free. Some really beautiful queer love story action. But lately, he has created this character named Marnie, who it's definitely worth going to his Instagram to see Marnie for yourself. But I just want to play one of the clips of her. They all end with the same punchline, which is the running joke of this character, Marnie, the spiritual teacher.
God consciousness is blessing every part of your life experience this morning. As the sun dawns on a new day of a rich and spectacular life full of all the things that you want, you can breathe in and know that you are responsible for all the joy that you see and all the joy that you're experiencing. It's yours, it's from you, it's for you, and it's for everyone else too. Everyone loves you. You love yourself, you love life. Life is working, you're happier than ever, and the only thing left for you to do is sign up for my class!
Ugh, God. It's so good. All right, I'm gonna leave us with this fucking beautiful track, Deep Silence from Loma Suyo. Every time this song comes on, I feel instantly better, like in my body, in my cells. So thank you, Liz. Thank you. If y'all want to find me, you know where I am. Maura James. I love you.
I wanna tear all my walls down. I don't think they'll make a sound. 'Cause I have been circling for so long. Is it time? Is it time to set down in a deep silence? I can see your eyes. You've got nothing to hide. I am the wing of some great bird. I have been circling for 1,000 years in a deep silence. I can see your eyes. You've got nothing. There is a magic see